Karol Rosa vs Nora Cornell, Battle of the Bantamweights. The women's bantamweight division is finally showing signs of life, especially with Kayla Harrison holding the title. And this matchup between Karol Rosa and Nora Cornell is a solid addition to that rebuild. Rosa is the better striker. Her boxing is tight, and she'll likely outpoint Cornell if they stay standing too long. Cornell has strong grappling and wrestling, but her striking setups are weak, and she tends to forget defense entirely when trading on the feet. However, Rosa's takedown defense is just okay. Cornell's best path is to pressure early and drag the fight to the mat. If she can do that without gassing herself out, she can steal rounds. But that's the catch. Cornell's cardio is a major issue, and it's affected by her tough weight cuts. If she doesn't get Rosa down early, she'll be a sitting duck by round 2. Rosa isn't flawless either, especially when defending takedowns, but she knows how to keep her distance, and she won't need much effort to push Cornell past her breaking point. Final prediction: Karol Rosa via decision or TKO. Rafael Estevam vs Felipe Bunes, a flyweight firefight. This could be the sleeper fight of the night. Both Rafael Estevam and Felipe Bunes fight like they've got somewhere to be, but the difference is Estevam is simply better everywhere. Estevam is faster, cleaner, and far more dangerous in both striking and grappling. Bunes is tough and comes forward, but he's also hittable and breakable. Estevam will likely swarm him early, push a crazy pace, and either get a late finish or dominate on points. Even tired, Estevam is still dangerous. We saw that against Charles Johnson, and Johnson is way more technical and skilled in the grappling department than Bunes. Unless Bunes lands a bomb or scrambles perfectly, this is Estevam's fight to lose. Final prediction: Rafael Estevam via submission or decision. Austin Bashi vs Yannis, the welcome to the UFC special. Another short notice opponent steps up on this card, and while that theme might usually signal a low-stakes fight, this one could get ugly fast. Yannis makes his UFC debut on barely a week's notice against Austin Bashi, who's already had his welcome to the UFC moment in his debut loss to Christian Rodriguez. Let's be clear, there's no shame in losing to Rodriguez. The guy has made a habit out of stealing undefeated records, and Bashi learned a lot from that fight. He got his feet wet in the UFC, dealt with adversity, and likely came out better for it. Now, he's got a full camp, and he was preparing for someone much tougher in Francis Marshall. Enter Yannis. Short notice, short prep time, and facing a relentless wrestler in Bashi, who's heavy on top and likes to grind his opponents into dust. Yannis has some skills, no doubt, but this is a brutal style matchup for him. He's stepping into deep waters against a grappler who won't give him space to breathe. His only real shot is to land something big early. If he can hurt Bashi in the first round, he has a puncher's chance. Otherwise, his cardio likely won't hold up, especially under a grappling-heavy attack from someone like Bashi. Expect Bashi to impose his will early. Whether he gets the finish or grinds out a decision depends on how much Yannis can survive. Final prediction: Austin Bashi via submission, rounds 2 or 3, or a clear decision. Klein vs Andrey Pulyaev, striking chess match. This one's all about pace and grit. Both Klein and Andrey Pulyaev are solid strikers who don't mind mixing it up. Pulyaev shines with his kicking game and long-range attacks, but he gets very passive under pressure. That's where Klein has the edge. He doesn't just throw combos, he bites down and fires back. He also mixes in occasional takedowns to break rhythm, though Pulyaev has shown solid hips and takedown defense. If Klein can push the pace and force Pulyaev into a defensive shell, he'll win. If he plays Pulyaev's slow-paced game, he might get outpointed. Final prediction: Klein via TKO or decision. Rodolfo Vieira vs Tresean Gore. This is a classic striker versus grappler matchup, with a modern twist. Rodolfo Vieira is one of the most dangerous BJJ artists in the UFC. If he gets on top or takes your back, you're in trouble. But his striking is still basic and low output. Gore, on the other hand, has very sharp boxing, but throws very little. He's precise and powerful but hesitant. That's why this fight could go either way. If Gore can stop the takedowns and keep it standing, he'll likely piece Vieira up. But if he doesn't stay active enough, Vieira could walk him down, get a takedown, and end it. Gore has better wrestling than most expect, but it's not at Petrowski's level, who survived 11 takedown attempts from Vieira. Gore will need to pressure and show urgency, something he rarely does. It's close, but I'll side with the grappler here. Final prediction: Rodolfo Vieira via decision or submission. Rinya Nakamura vs Nathan Fletcher, Grappler's Playground. Rinya Nakamura came into the UFC with a lot of hype, and for good reason. His wrestling is elite, but in his last fight against Gafurov, his striking was exposed. When forced to stand for extended periods, he looked uncomfortable and limited. Fletcher is also a strong grappler, but he's a better striker and far more fluid on the feet. On paper, that gives him a path to victory, if he can stuff the takedowns. But that's a big if. Fletcher got ragdolled by Loughran, whose wrestling isn't on Nakamura's level. So chances are, Nakamura will have his way once the fight hits the ground. I expect Nakamura to test his striking for a bit, but once he gets touched up, he'll default to what works, grappling dominance. Final prediction, Rinya Nakamura via decision or submission, likely a dominant decision. Danny Silva vs Kevin Vallejos, boxing battle incoming. This one's for the hands. Danny Silva vs Kevin Vallejos is this card's unofficial boxing match, and it may have snuck in thanks to Dana White's new obsession with boxing. Canelo vs Crawford promo, anyone? Silva is aggressive and throws with bad intentions, but his defense is leaky. Vallejos, while also defensively flawed, is much more durable. If this becomes the pocket war it's shaping up to be, durability could decide everything. Silva can win if he mixes it up and doesn't just stand and trade, but something tells me he's going to get drawn into a firefight. If so, Vallejos is more likely to come out on top. Final prediction, Kevin Vallejos via decision or TKO. Neil Magny vs Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, a veteran showdown. Two longtime UFC welterweights square off in a gritty matchup. Neil Magny and Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos are both experienced, well-rounded, and tough as nails. But the key difference? Grappling. Magny has solid wrestling and uses his long frame well, but dos Santos is the more dangerous grappler overall. If he gets Magny to the mat or takes his back, it could be lights out. On the feet, Magny will try to stay long and use his jab, while dos Santos will look to close the distance with leg kicks and pressure. Magny tends to start slow and work his way into the fight. Against dos Santos, that's a risky move. If he lets Elizeu get ahead early, it may be too late to catch up, especially if he's already dealing with leg damage or grappling pressure. Magny's takedown defense has always been spotty, and dos Santos will take full advantage of that. Even in striking exchanges, dos Santos' pressure style will keep Magny on his back foot. Final prediction, Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos via decision or submission. Karol Rosa vs Nora Cornell, battle of the bantamweights. The women's bantamweight division is finally showing signs of life, especially with Kayla Harrison holding the title. And this matchup between Karol Rosa and Nora Cornell is a solid addition to that rebuild. Rosa is the better striker, her boxing is tight, and she'll likely outpoint Cornell if they stay standing too long. Cornell has strong grappling and wrestling, but her striking setups are weak, and she tends to forget defense entirely when trading on the feet. However, Rosa's takedown defense is just okay. Cornell's best path is to pressure early and drag the fight to the mat. If she can do that without gassing herself out, she can steal rounds. But that's the catch. Cornell's cardio is a major issue, and it's affected by her tough weight cuts. If she doesn't get Rosa down early, she'll be a sitting duck by round 2. Rosa isn't flawless either, especially when defending takedowns, but she knows how to keep her distance, and she won't need much effort to push Cornell past her breaking point. Final prediction, Karol Rosa via decision or TKO. Els Brenner vs Esteban Ribovics, chaos incoming. If this fight had a title, it'd be technical car crash. Els Brenner and Esteban Ribovics are both chaotic in the best, and sometimes worst, ways. They fight like there's a taxi waiting outside, and they usually bring the crowd to life. Ribovics has some of the cleanest boxing in the division. His jab is sharp, and he's great with combos, but he lacks variety. He tends to headhunt, which cost him in the fight against Nasrat Hakparist. Nasrat kept a high guard, defended well, and outpointed him by making Ribovics predictable. Brenner, on the other hand, is wild but smarter than people give him credit for. Sure, his defense is trash and he has his meathead moments, but he mixes things up. If he leans on his wrestling, he averages over 3 takedowns per fight. He could make life hell for Ribovics. If Brenner stands and tries to match Ribovics' output and pressure, it'll be a disaster. Ribovics thrives in high-paced, close-range exchanges. But if Brenner uses feints and level changes to force grappling scrambles, he can steal rounds or even get a finish. That said, Ribovics has improved his takedown defense. If he can stay standing, he'll likely push Brenner back, land the more meaningful strikes, and win either by TKO or a dominant decision. Final prediction, Esteban Ribovics via decision or TKO. Mariusz Rebecki vs Chris Duncan. Rebecki has already earned a reputation as one of the toughest guys in the lightweight division. His last war with Oralbi was a brutal, momentum-shifting battle that may have taken a few years off his career, or maybe not, considering the guy is built like a tank and somehow just keeps going. This time, he's facing Chris Duncan, a heavy-handed striker who brings real power to every exchange. Duncan might be one of the hardest punchers Rebecca has faced, though Rebecca's been in with some serious bangers already, so it's tough to say for sure. What we do know is this: Rebecca can't afford to take the kind of shots he ate in his last fight again. If he does, Duncan may not give him the chance to recover. That said, Rebecca has a clear path to victory, and that's through his wrestling. Duncan has worked on his takedown defense, but it's still a work in progress. If Rebecca commits to wrestling early, he can grind Duncan down, control the pace, and take away Duncan's biggest weapon, his punching power. Rebecca might even bait Duncan into thinking they're in for another wild brawl, only to change levels and drag him to the mat. If he gets on top, he can wear Duncan down, chip away with ground strikes, or look for a submission. Still, Duncan isn't without paths to victory. If he can crack Rebecca early and force respect, he could turn the tide and potentially even get a finish. Duncan fights with a slower, more methodical pace. He waits for the mistake and then pounces, but I don't think Rebecca will give him the chance. Rebecca's sub-defense is solid, and I don't see him falling into a guillotine or any quick submission setups. As long as he fights smart and doesn't let ego turn this into a slugfest, he should be able to get the win. Final prediction: Mariusz Rebecca via decision, submission, or TKO. Tatsuro Taira vs Hyun Sung Park. The main event for this under-the-radar UFC Fight Night card features Japan's Tatsuro Taira taking on South Korea's undefeated Hyun Sung Park. It's not the kind of headliner that sets social media on fire. But make no mistake, this has potential to be a fun, technical fight between two rising prospects in the flyweight division. Taira is coming off the first loss of his career, a competitive decision against Brandon Royval, who at the time was a top contender in the division. That fight taught Taira a lot about himself and his standing in the division. He didn't get dominated, he simply got out-experienced. Now he's back, and he'll be looking to show that he's still a top-level threat. Hyun Sung Park steps in on incredibly short notice, just about a week, to replace Amir Albazi. That's a tall task against someone like Taira. Park is talented, determined, and undefeated, but he hasn't fought anyone near Taira's level, and the short prep time only widens that gap. Maybe he was inspired by Joshua Van's recent performance against Royval, but Van had more time to prepare, and even he was fading badly by the end of that fight. It's important to note that Van vs Royval was a 3-round fight. Had it gone 5, most agree Royval's superior cardio would have turned the tide. That's relevant here because if Park doesn't get Taira out early, or at least win the early rounds convincingly, he's going to have a hard time hanging with Taira down the stretch. Taira is more composed than Royval, more defensively responsible, and less likely to give Park any big windows of opportunity. Park may outstrike him early or stuff some takedowns, but I expect Taira to take over late. Final prediction: Tatsuro Taira via decision or submission, rounds 4 or 5.